My name is Eric Esteves, Executive Director of the Lenny Zakim Fund, and today our featured facilitator is Ben Echevarria, who's the Executive Director of the Welcome Project, which is based in Somerville, but um, serves a population much broader than just Somerville. And with that, Ben, who started off as a volunteer, was a board member, and now runs the organization. We're going to dive into a session on fundraising using the power of storytelling. And again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. And with that being said, Ben, take us away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Linda, what is NEU4J? I don't know the acronym, sorry.
I'm sorry, that's my fault. I just got in from dropping off deliveries for Boston Veteran Services. NEU4J is New England United for Justice.
Okay, great. All right, so some of the organizations I know, some of them I don't know. I will give you a little background on me and then sort of the Welcome Project and my journey a little bit, and we can kick it off from there. I'm hoping that this will be a much more of a collaborative. I mean, I have some information that I'll share. So the Welcome Project, 34 years old organization, founded back in 1987 after court order forcing integration of housing and of immigrants and refugees into housing. So we literally started out of a lot of discrimination that that people had towards immigrants coming in. Over the years, we've slowly sort of to expand where over the last 6 years since, I've taken over, our budget has literally tripled from when I took it over to where it is now. We have expanded to servicing just when we originally started, just one housing development to sort of all the housing developments to servicing all of Somerville to now servicing the Metro North area of Boston. So we cover Malden, Everett, Medford, Cambridge, sort of the other side of the river when you think of Boston. We have really grown, and a lot of our growth sort of comes from using stories. And we'll talk about the power of stories and everything else. Now, this topic was pretty broad in the sense of, there's different forms of storytelling for different audiences. So I tried to capture sort of, the generalities, but if people want to talk about any specific ways of doing it, such as storytelling for, in terms of like appeal letters and emails, or, when you talk to major donors or anything like that, I'm more than glad to sort of, tailor some things down a little bit. But I figured we can start with some basics and go from there. Does that sound good to everyone? Yes, all right. I am going to share my screen. Let's see if that works. How does that work? Okay. So everyone can see my screen? All right, see some head shaking and everything else. Great. All right, so basically, like I said, I want to start off with a basic definition. Let me see. Here we go. So basically for me, storytelling is a series of facts told with emotions and details to raise money. Simple, easy. There are some key components here that I think of. One is emotion, two is details. So, and I think of details also having facts in here. And then, obviously the end goal is money. If we look at this picture, this is sort of how I think of storytelling, right? Story will have a few components, which we'll talk about later. There's usually some sort of conflict that happened. There's usually some sort of hope that you're giving. And you as the writer are feeding this to the donor. So that's the person who needs to make a decision. And then out of that, there are some actions, right? There is sort of, there's the ask that you made, that they fulfilled the ask. There is something shared, meaning that you shared you have a shared vision of what you're looking for, and that they're, again, they're sharing in that vision by giving money, and your goal is achieved. So sometimes when you talk with major donors, sometimes your goal is not just money, but also getting a broader commitment from them. So, you know, they join a committee, they ask for their, you know, you may ask for a host, for them to host an event for them, like a house party or something like that. And, you know, so that there are other pieces and that your story got that goal achieved. So things to think about beforehand, right? Before you get to the story and how you're going to tell it and everything, I like to think about, who am I telling a story to? So the audience. There is a lot of science here to talk about who the audience are, who are your donors, right? You are going to know your donors better than anybody else in the organization. Whether you're the executive director and you're the only person responsible for fundraising. You are if you're big enough and you have somebody who helps with fundraising, you're probably going to know the people that you're talking to better than anybody else in the organization. So when you think about that, what's compelling to them? What are things that are going to make them sit down, that's going to make them listen and read, or write, or whatever it is? So you want to think about that. So what kind of stories do you want to hear? For the Welcome Project, it varies a little bit, right? We're an immigrant organization. However, we're an empowerment organization. We're also, because especially in the cities we serve, the majority of the immigrant community that we serve are probably the largest portions of people of color, the BIPOC populations that that these cities are dealing with. So we also become, sort of the race equity organization in the city. And then the other piece is it missional? Thinking about your organization, what you do, how do you serve it? You always want to ask, does this story that I'm going to tell, does it serve the mission that we're trying to do? So for instance, there are a host of stories that, the Welcome Project could talk about when you think about it in these lenses. However, I am not going to talk about something, and I'm sure there are groups here, but I'm not going to talk about a program, or I'm not going to talk about the benefits of, off campus or, sleepaway camps, summer camps for kids. There is a host of benefits to that. And there's a lot of reasons why the Welcome Project may sponsor one, but it's not the main reason why we do things. So it's something, I'm not going to necessarily put that story out there. However, something like our summer camp, where we work with youth and we talk about, I can talk about educational, summer retention, retention skills. So things that, you learn from, you keep from, there's something called drain, right? So over the summer, students will lose education, some of the knowledge that they had. And I may say, hey, we do this summer camp because at the end of the day, they are able to, because our students, and we're worried about, building their collective power, and education's the focus of that. So I want to think about, how do I frame things in a way that makes sense? And if somebody has a question, take yourself off mute, because quite honestly, I'll look for the chat, but I cannot necessarily see everything at once. So just to make me aware of things. The next thing, stories, right? You need stories in order to do it. So things to think about in a story. Do you have a person or an event you want to talk about? Even if you have an event, you do want to think about a person still in there. Some of the things you want to think about: what's the conflict that's happening? What are the facts that are happening? Emotions, what type of emotions will it evoke? And is your story unique? So again, I'm an immigrant organization. There are a bunch of immigration stories out there. What makes the Welcome Project different in the eyes of a donor compared to everybody else? So, the thing is, and studies show, if they're donating to me, they're probably donating to at least one or two other immigrant organizations. And how do they differentiate mine compared to the other ones? So what makes my organization different than, SIMS, or different than Student Immigration Movement, which is a great organization that I love? What makes us different than theirs? And they're thinking the same thing. What makes them different than us? So that's the type of thing that I'm thinking about here. facts are, when I think of facts, it's not just facts of the story, it's facts in my database. So what facts can I draw from, or what data pieces can I draw from here? So for instance, when I'm thinking about our population and I think of a story, and I am going to use Aldolfo. He's the restaurant owner that, that we have, and he's in our English classes. I can paint a story here about, how many of our immigrants are entrepreneurs if I wanted. I can paint a story here, how many people, do we serve in our English classes if I'm going to tell this story. And I'm going to use that as a fact that, that Adolfo, he's one of 500 people that will come through our English classes every year. I can talk about something else. I can talk about the fact that, we have moved policy because, he as an immigrant business owner had problems with connecting with the city and what we did. And I can talk about that in a greater scale. So what are things that make you unique, but that you have some data points, some metrics that you can use? This is also great when you're thinking about, in grant writing, when they talk about, the demographics you serve and that type of thing. You can give stories and talk about how these people represent a larger portion of who you serve. We'll talk about conflict a little later. I thought it was important that we put it here. And again, one of the things you also want to think about is how do you collect stories? We have a staff meeting every week, and we also have a spreadsheet. So every week I'm asking people, do they have a story that, we may want to use or highlight in fundraising? I'm also asking other questions as well, but it's a question that I ask. And if somebody brings up something, I quickly put into my a link to the Google sheet that they can add the story. I may not use it now, but when I write an appeal or I'm thinking about a video, I'm thinking about something, I look at these stories and see which one's compelling. And also I think about who am I want to talk to. So sometimes I use stories just if I'm going to meet with a specific major donor and I'm asking for an increase and I want to talk about the work we're doing. I may have one story for them specifically that, that my staff gave me. The facts, like we talked about. Facts should be unique. They should be inherent to your organization. The data points should be about your organization. The facts should be unique. So, we do organizing. And if I talk about, hey, we had a rally and we had 500 people show up. Yeah, that's great. But you know what? So many other immigrant organizations are having rallies and, and may have bigger people show up for their numbers. So unless I can say, how big it was in a way that, that says, wow, there were so many people. I'm not going to use that, that piece. I may talk about, speakers we had. I may talk about, why why we held this rally, or, and that's going to lead to a story. Your facts should be compelling. Again, now 500 people in a middle of January, 30-degree weather day is a nice fact to say. 500 people, middle of summer, or right after the Women's March when, they had 30,000 people show up at their events, not so much. So, you want to think about your facts and, you really want to think about how does it position you to, to look, not just look great, but also, what does it say about your outreach? So in this sense, if I'm really saying, hey, we're really organizing and, and political, I have to think about that. So, and again, like I said here, data, is there anything from your programs? Are there metrics you can use? Are there, are there certain pieces here? One data point that I love to use is, we've done some, we're sort of in the process of doing a strategic plan. And one of the things we wanted to look at was, we did an internal review of all our constituents and we did a couple surveys. And, we had an independent person do these reviews. And one of the things that came out was, our constituency compared to the city, trust us, what was the range? 80% of our constituents trust us more than they trust the city for information. Think about that for a minute. You know, city government in Somerville's very progressive. You know, Welcome Project passes, you know, a welcoming ordinance. Our police doesn't work with ICE. Our police, you know, doesn't, our government doesn't work on, you know, on these issues like with the federal government. But yet our constituencies trust us more than they trust whatever the city puts out. So during COVID times, which is, you know, when we're all fundraising, this is a fact that I've used. You know, hey, 80% of our constituents are going to listen to what we say, and I need your help in making sure we get the word out to our constituents. I need to make sure that, you know, we're actually mobilizing in a way, which means I need a new, you know, a person to do X. I need you to help fund a position. So think about that as you're doing, you know, as you're doing that piece. Emotions. We'll talk a little bit more about this, and when you see, and I sort of have a formula of how I craft these stories, you know, you want to think about emotions. You want to think about how did people feel? You know, what were they thinking? Like I write in the second line, you want to, you know, for the readers, you want to be their eyes, their ears, their nose. So, you know, you know, think about it. If you're really going to highlight like a rally, you know, you want to think about the smells in the air. Or if you're doing a festival, right? You know, we don't do them, but I know so many organizations that do festivals, and you want to talk about, you know, again, okay, I'm Latino, so, you know, thinking about the smell of, you know, of pernil, you know, this roasted pork. When, you know, when I think of like the Puerto Rican festival that I, you know, that I go to, like the smells of the rice in the air, the, you know, the smells of, you know, popcorn, cotton candy, whatever it is. Think about those things, right? You know, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Like, what are people saying? You know, like, oh my God, I can't believe how many people are here, or, you know, the fears they may have. You know, what are the different things that are going on? You are the storyteller. You want to make a connection, as it says in the, you know, in the other point, you want to make a connection between the donor and you and the story. So the whole thing is that, again, be the donor. You don't, and again, you don't have to like write, if you're writing a fall appeal, you don't have to write a whole paragraph about how the place smells. But think about it. People, you know, people look and take interest in different pieces of things. So you just really want to think about, like, you know, how do you illuminate these pieces? Oops. Sorry, I'm trying to do it. All right. I like this graphic again. You know, this is literally what you want to do. You want to write something that gives the donor hope that their money is going to make a change, right? And the way you get them to get hope is by showing them the conflict and the story that you're telling. So, you know, people love to overcome things. People love to, you know, to literally, you know, do things in a way that everyone is, you know, like I said, me being able to say, in another data point that I just discovered in our COVID outreach in Somerville, our COVID outreach, for every call that the city's getting from an immigrant from the immigrant service unit that they're working with, the Welcome Project is working on 3 calls. That's an outcome people want to hear with their money. So you want to think about these things and say, you know, because of the work. And this is, you know, and what I'm hoping is, you know, we're getting 3 calls. I'm hoping if you staff another person, you're giving me 5 calls. You know, my number can be 5 times higher. So you want to think about that. How do you weave data into it? And there's a whole science to this. I really want to share with you sort of a short piece here. So crafting a story. Does anybody have any questions before we get to this part about things to think about and either ideas of where to get stories, you know, that type of thing? I can't see, so I'm assuming you all can take yourself off mute if you have anything. And I kind of see a lot of.
There aren't any questions in the chat yet.
Okay, I thought, sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I volunteer and I'm on the board with the Attleboro Area Interfaith Collaborative.
Mhm.
And our biggest program is called Food and Friends. So we serve at 6 nightly kitchens a week. We had to move outdoors, meals to go during the pandemic. We have kids summer program. We give lunches in the park during the summertime, you know, all addressing food insecurity. And
Right.
I just related to this, like the telling of the story. It seems like we definitely want to be, we don't know, like, we want to get consent from everyone to tell their story or to mention their story in fundraising efforts. Could you comment on that, like the need or not? I mean, the need for consent, and what that's like for you?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways we do consent. So if I'm talking to an individual donor, I don't use the person's real name or identity. I just tell them, hey, I want to share a story. I'm changing some names here. You know, based on the populations we serve, you know, there's a reason why people may not want to use, you know, us to use their real name. When I write anything, I always ask for them to have, you know, I always put consent. If we do a video, same thing. Anything that literally, you know, if I'm talking about somebody very specific, I always ask about consent.
Okay.
You know, however, at the same time too, which we've done, and I have, you know, and I have said, you know, I'm making a mock-up of our constituents and I'm giving a name. So for instance, with you, you can say, you know, Jody makes, you know, Jody is a representative of 80% of our constituents, you know, who are, you know, who face food insecurity, who over the summer, you know, all get free lunch, which, you know, in school get free, you know, free breakfast and lunch. And they are, you know, we know during this, you know, so therefore we know during the summer, unless our food is, you know, unless we provide these meals, Jody will not have breakfast or lunch, you know, during the day. So you can do sort of a composite, you know, a composite of a person. You just want to make sure you're saying it's a composite of people too.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody have any other questions before we kind of dig into sort of the nuts and bolts of it?
I do. I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you tell a story and not feel like you're using the person's story? So like, how do you tell a story and you're making it emotional, but you're not framing it as help these poor people?
Yeah, I tend to call this the Sally Struthers way of fundraising, where it's, you know, feed the children, they're needy. This is, you know, this is a line that, you know, my board and I have held high on, and, you know, I have rejected, you know, ideas just for this reason. So, you know, one of the things that I always do and highlight is the empowerment. So, you know, without even going into this, is sort of, you know, the prize, the battle, you know, the long road to victory. So it is, you know, it's talking about their success, but also it's, you know, you want to highlight things and be able to say things like, you know, let me think here for a minute. You know, most recently there was an article we put together for our fall appeal, and there's a lot of ways we could have gone with this story, where we, you know, where you know, one of our constituents basically came to us, and, you know, he still had his children. So basically he came here and was working, and, you know, wanted to then send for his, you know, his wife and his kids. Gangs got a hold and found out that, you know, that this guy was working in the United States and wanted to hold his children hostage. And, you know, we could have said, you know, this, you know, he didn't know what to do. And, you know, and we really could have made this story of sort of, you know, how we took over and did all this work. But one of the things that we did was really highlight, you know, what we did for him. So, you know, we got him in touch with, you know, with the consulate that he worked with, that from his country. He met with the he met with the consulate, he worked with them. And, he did all, he filled out all the paperwork. Yes, we got him a lawyer, we got him in touch with a lawyer that could do asylum, an asylum case for him, but he did all the work. So, so when we talked about it, it wasn't, it wasn't saying, we got him a lawyer, we did this, and, and he did nothing. It was, we empowered him. And the way we empowered him to do that work was by giving him the steps to move forward. And we used our platform and our, and our reach to help him. So, one of the things you want to think about, and it's true, there's a fine line here. You want to highlight the steps that they're taking. You want to talk about, which is sort of it's the fourth line here, the threshold crossed, and we'll talk about that more in a second. But, you want to talk about the steps that they're doing. You partnered with them. You didn't do all the work for them. You partnered with them. You empowered them. You didn't empower them. You gave them the resources because they're already empowered. They felt like they are. So instance, we do leadership development. We drop the word empowered. We don't empower people anymore. We just merely help them with with the tools that they need to continue on their leadership ladder. It's no longer, we did all these things. We're giving them tools. We share tools with them. We share with them in their journey. Those are sort of the ways, that we frame that. Does that make sense to people? Yeah, it's how you frame it. And, there is a lot of movement sort of away from, feed the children, feed the needy kind of thing, in that sense of like, when you think about, World Vision, 20 years ago on TV kind of thing. It's, it's more of moving. How did you work with the people, so that they can continue going on that journey? So I just wanted to talk about, the way I look at stories and crafting stories is a movie. And we'll talk about this in a very generalized way, right? So, these are sort of the things that I think about in it. So, there's the introductions, there's the intro to the problem, the threshold cross, building, the battle, the prize, the long road to victory kind of thing. And, so for instance, the introductions, they're normal people. They're things are good. Think of, I won't lie, one of my favorite movies. Think of Lord of the Rings, right? They came along, life was good. They were all playing games. They were all doing, they were all nothing out of the ordinary. Something happens, right? There is some, they start realizing things aren't right. So, you want to think about that. What is the thing that they're confronting? So, in Lord of the Rings, they start realizing, home is no longer the way to go. They find a ring. They're going on this journey, right? And this is sort of the beginning of that journey. And, for us, it's, it could be as simple as, and I'm making up names here. So, Juan is a Somerville resident, comes from El Salvador, and Juan is working in a restaurant. However, because of limited English, he decided to join our English classes. He felt that being part of our English classes, he could expand his vocabulary, and by expanding his vocabulary, he'd be able to get better jobs than being a busboy. So, this is sort of the basic thing here, right? The basic problem here is English, that he's lacking, he lacks some skills here. And, you may talk about what he's thinking, what he's feeling. So, Wong is thinking that, if he really wants to make any decent money, he needs to learn English. And so therefore, excitedly, he comes into our English classes. So then the reactions. He faced the problem. He knows that he can make more money. His next steps are he's going to come to our English classes. But what happened in between all of that? Did he talk to people? Did he start figuring out what to do? So Wang starts talking in Spanish, to his wife. His wife happens to be in our English classes, or took our English classes. And, and he says, your English is great. How do you improve on that? So he's starting to work on that. Threshold cross is he came in for our classes. Simple as that, right? He signs up for our classes, he starts taking it. Think of the details you have here, right? How did he feel coming into the classroom? What was he thinking? What was his thoughts here? What was his reactions? Did he have a moment where he was just like, I really don't want to do this? Or, my life is busy, I'm working so many hours, but I'm going to do this because this is worth it. So now it's the building part, right? He's in our classes and he's struggling. He's struggling to learn English, just like, and I can use a data point here, just like 80% of our, or actually I think it's like something like 60% of our constituents say, the level 1 English class, which is our most basic, it's a struggle for them. It's hard for them. And I can talk about, some of these things. It could be, how families pulling him, how the need for money is greater, how him coming into class, it's taking him away from making extra income. There's all these different things. And there's something here, right? The battle. So he's confronted with, a hard time where he's struggling with the English classes, and he's not understanding it. Maybe the teacher asked him for something, or maybe in this case, more than likely, he's hitting some sort of economic problem here, where our class time is not necessarily a great time for him anymore because his job is shifting. From he was taking our day classes, but now his job wants him during the day. What's going on here? And I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. I could use things like in organizing. Obviously, that's, we have a policy. We're fighting for a policy. Now, we're trying to get this policy passed. And, there's all these legislators or city councilors or whatever that just don't want, that are really against us as we're meeting with people. So this is as broad as broad as you want to make it, or as narrow as you want to make it here. He sticks with the classes. He finishes the level 1 class, right? This is great. He's feeling good. He finished level 1. He, his boss is telling him how great his English is, how much his English has improved. He graduated. What is he thinking? What is he feeling like? And again, think of your data point. Think about how many people in your English classes are having the same thoughts as him. Think about how many people are, how many people completed your English classes, your level 1 English class versus, versus other English classes. I may want to do a comparison here, right? My program versus, say, a school's adult ed program. Or, I don't really want to compare it to other people's English classes because, I think everyone knows this, yeah, in fundraising, you are quote unquote competing with people, but at the same time too, it's a bad look when you just put that out there, especially to donors. They want to see everyone, we all work together and, and all those things. So, so for me, I never compare myself with other organizations. I always compare myself to the government. I always compare, some sort of entity that isn't relying on, on fundraising numbers. So think about those things. I didn't add anything here. The long road to victory, he only finished the English 1 class, right? There are so many people here. There are, for every 1 person in our English class, we have 3 people on our wait list. Wang's journey is on, he still has 3 levels of other English classes with us. And his journey he'll need to continue with the victory here. He will face this struggle again in level 2. And without your help to be able to, without your help, Juan we may not be able to offer a second English class. I usually say with your help, because of you, because of the work you do and your generous gift, Juan will be placed in a second level English class. Juan will receive a stipend here or receive a scholarship to enter into our English classes. And, so therefore Juan will not have to worry about paying for English classes. However, Juan is one of 100 people that will, 500 people will serve a year in our English classes. Can you help give to ensure that economics is not a reason why people will not learn English? Can you help here to, can you join with me? And usually I like to use, and when you talk with donors, there's something called donor centric. I don't know if people know about that phrase within fundraising. Donor centric fundraising is where you make the donor part of the journey. So you want to think about things like we, right? So, and you want to think about how do you use the word we, because people may think we meaning the Welcome Project, whereas I want to make sure that they know the we includes them. So, because of if I was doing storytelling in a thank you note, it's because of your gift of whatever dollar amount. If I'm using this to raise money, it literally is, because of your generosity, we are able to give X amount of people, whatever that is. And you want to think about that. How do you frame this in a way that, that really makes sense? Anybody have any questions for me at the moment? Okay, so is anybody working on something that they want to share? Because if not, I want to come off of this and I want to, oops, go ahead. Somebody had a question?
I would like to talk about my situation and ask you a little bit of help.
Yeah.
I have a center in Waltham, and we work with youth, and they're all immigrants from mainly Uganda, like 90% Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
And the community is totally the way you've explained your community in all the ways. So and mainly the Ugandan community, whenever they come here, they just become nurses, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say there's also other jobs. So we've raised many youth and they've gone to college 111. But this special year, this 2021, we are graduating 6 students. And they're all going to college, and 4 of them have a full scholarship. And it has been a work from Africano to empower these kids. The kids have done the job, like you said, and we are so proud of them. But we want to highlight that story, that look at this that has happened, and help us make it happen for many more. And yeah, so I think I'm like right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what little tips can come into that story.
Yeah, so I think, you start off with what you said, how many people start, come into, let's back up a little. So you want to use this to ask people for more money, right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And sometimes when we ask like general, people don't find it urgent.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, well, like you also mentioned before, we never want to put these kids in the begging position. We always introduce them from a strong position. We always work from a strong area. We are helping strong people. We're supporting strong children, not weak ones.
Right.
So sometimes when you go out to the donor, they're like, why would they need us anyway? I mean, they look at them, they're performing, they look nice, they're smiling. And they forget that smile did not come today. It is a work behind. So, yeah.
So what I would do is, I would think of one person to tell their story. You would probably start off with, you want to do an introduction, obviously, and think of the person. But part of it here is you want to think about the data points, right? Depending on, so if you're doing, I don't know your personal donors per se, but, if they're anything like mine, which I'm assuming they sort of are,
Yeah.
Things that I would think about in terms of how do you frame the story at the beginning would be, economic development or, economic mobility. Think about your population. Think about how many, what's the average income for somebody. And, and you want to spread that out a little bit. So, you want to say, most of our constituents come from, these are the demographics, I mean, I know for our population, 90% of the people fall below the federal poverty line.
Yeah, we too, the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to say, you want to say that. And you can just say federal poverty line. Most people understand that. If you wanted to, you could say, a family of 4, this is, what is it, 48,000, I believe.
Yeah.
Is what people make, which translates, you may want to do something, rent or whatever. You want to think about how do you translate that in a way that people really make sense. So a lot of times, I usually use something like, the average rent in, in Somerville for a 3-bedroom, thinking if it's a family of 4, it's a, it's a married couple. So a set of partners and then 2 kids.
Yeah.
So 3 bedrooms, the average rent for a 3-bedroom apartment is $2,400 a month. And then I would say, I would have to do the math, but then I would say, that's X amount of percent of somebody's income who's at the federal poverty line. So you want to spell that out a little bit, right?
Yeah, can I ask a little bit again there?
Yeah.
Like most of the community we have here, in a 3-bedroom house, there lives 3 families. It's not the right thing to do, but
No,
I'm just
you can
telling
say that.
they do live like that.
Yeah, no,
because
you
they
say
can't
that.
afford. They can't afford the rent.
Right, and that's something you want to say. You could even say move away from the federal poverty line. Say many of our, maybe many of our constituents live 3 families to an apartment because they cannot afford the rents here. And and you want to give it a, and you want to say something like, with your help, we're able, and you want to tell the story of one person. So John. John came into our program. He's, a high school student, first generation, second generation, wherever, whatever it is, give a little outline of who he is. And then talk about it, talk a little bit about, talk about him a little bit. You're going to give him an introduction. You want to talk about the problem, the barrier being college.
Yeah.
And, how hard it is for people to, first generations to come into college, especially depending on, things like if they're undocumented applying for college and, coming up with financial aid, if they're documented, the fact of student loans and all those different things and navigating the system. How do you navigate the how do you navigate the college, applying for college?
Yeah.
And, you want to talk about, both him, both John and his parents talking about college.
Yeah.
And then like, what were the first steps? That's the threshold. John came into our program, we helped, and this is the building part, our program, like our program does for First Access. Our program, we went through some basic stuff. We go on college visits. We allow them to do certain, we get them into schools, both a large school, a small school, and a, medium-sized school. We get them into classrooms. So that way, John had a better feeling of what would be the best fit for him.
Yeah.
John comes to us and tells us these are the schools he wants to apply for. And with John and with his parents, we draw out a plan. Okay, let's get all your applications in. Let's find out how do we help with financial, you don't understand how to do the financial aid process, great. You know, we're going to have a workshop on how to do this. So those are all the things. And then John, you know, the threshold John's doing here is he's applying. Yeah. And, you know, the struggle in the building is really you all, what you're doing to help, you know, to help John in his journey of going to college.
Yeah. Yeah. We visited the colleges.
Right. The battle is everything else, sort of, you know, the finances against him, the, you know, the cultural things. John wants to go to a, you know, a school with a dorm and, you know, wants to live away, which is not cultural or whatever that is.
Yeah.
John got into whatever school it is. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Now the journey, you know, the long road is, you know, we were only able to help 6 people this year due to funding.
Yeah.
However, you know, thanks to you, we got 6. We need, you know, we're shooting for 12 people, you know, for 12 more next year. Yeah. And we need your support.
Yeah.
You know, we need your assistance in helping to make the dream of college come true for 12 students next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, can you give, or, you know, or even sometimes, depending on if you're using software to, you know, to help with this, you may have some data points. You know, last year you gave, you know, $100. Can you give us $200? So that way, doubling your donation, because we're trying to double the amount of people we can get into college.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's powerful. Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? Or anything you're working on?
I do. And so, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Lily. So I am in the process of working on a program that I will launch probably in June of 2022. And so this is really very, very helpful to listen to you. The program will be to create a project for women who were formerly incarcerated, and upon release, you know, the trend right now is that as soon as someone, whether male or female, is released from prison, the trend is to quickly get them the work ready force, you know, be work readiness to prove to society your you know, that your worthiness as a citizen, and you know, that's all in good, and I certainly have my opinion about that. However, for our focus at the Resilient Sisterhood Project is on women of African descent reproductive health. So my approach, what I'm working on is like, before these women are pushed out into this work readiness force, I want to, I'm working on something to project to ensure that these women's reproductive health is addressed first, because before, many of these women prior to being incarcerated, and never mind while they were incarcerated, and certainly upon release, they've had limited access to any gynecological care, and many of them come out with all kinds of reproductive health and just overall health issues, period. So I in trying to, I'm not trying to buck the trend of pushing this work readiness space, but I really want to make sure that these women they can have a second to breathe, and where there can be a holistic approach to just like addressing and respecting their humanity and dignity. And you know, given that many of these women, they were the backbones of their families, and while they come out, they still remain the backbones, or will need to become backbones of their families. And we need healthy women. And it's also very hard to get women to prioritize their reproductive health. And all of us, even when those of us who are doing well, it's because we are mired in so many issues. So making sure that we get them to address their reproductive health first, it's easier to make them see a primary care physician, and so on and so forth. So, and that in terms, if we have healthy women, that address the economic mobility that people are pushing to through the work readiness. So I'm, and so the project, I want to start it as a pilot project in connection with a couple of community partners. So, and I've been just like racking my brain about the seed donors that I will be approaching. I have appointments, I've scheduled appointment with some like 2 or 3 months down the road, because I wanted to have much more clarity about some of the, how to approach folks. And so I've been thinking like, well, what metrics or what data points do I present to them? First of all, I know that I want to present as a pilot project because it's a very scalable. The goal is to make it healthy. I mean, successful here in Boston, but it's very scalable and should be nationally. But I'm just trying to think about where people are very focused on the economic mobility. While I totally understand that, but that's my priority is more like we need healthy people first. If you really want to achieve that. So what would you suggest in terms of data points that I could present in terms of like the health issues, piloting the project, and the importance of the seed money, with the seed money, what it can help to achieve. I'm just still a little bit all over the place. Just trying to make sure that when that I go as prepared as possible when speaking to donors that I'm hoping that can gift us the funding that we will need for the project.
Yeah, this is a tricky one.
Yes.
Sort of putting on my fundraising hat, the first thing I would probably say is, there should be before I launch any program, I do something called a case for support, where basically, I kind of put in, I put into writing, like the mission of the organization that you're trying to do, what is the reason, and then it's sort of like the reason of why you're creating the program. What statistics do you have out there that, that make you say, oh God, there's a problem here. So, you may want to think about, and I don't know these numbers, admittedly, I surprised, I don't know much about reproductive health. I will admit that one. But I would say, things that would strike me, I would want to think about is, how many women come out of incarceration and don't realize they have, whether it's, what state are they in, I guess. So think about that in the sense of mental health. Think about it about, how many of them are not, may have caught an STD and don't know it. Are there statistics out there of, women when it comes, coming out of jail having, if they had a baby, having miscarriages and, like all those pieces of when you think about reproductive health, are there certain data points out there? Then you want to address sort of what you plan on doing. So your introduction is sort of thinking about, these large things. And, but what you want to think about is, again, if these things happen, so if I do, so this is the picture of overall of, why I'm thinking about that. And then it comes down to, so these are the barriers once they come into the community. They're required, are ready to have a job. They're already motherhood, they're already doing all these things. And, what are the long-term impacts, in terms of, of dealing with this. And then, think about the, the long road to victory, which is sort of the, if we're able to address these issues as they're coming out of jail, immediately, this is what we see, happening. So think about sort of, you have a hypothesis, use math, you have a theory here. And, you know, you want to now say, this is the theory, this is, you know, why I'm seeing the theory. So now if I do all these things, I believe this is the outcome we're going to get. And you want to be able to say, you know, this is the outcome we're achieving. So, you know, and just say, this is what we believe will happen. Especially when you meet with donors for pilot projects, you want to be clear with them. Look, we have a theory here, and, you know, this is the reasons why, and this is what I'm hoping we're going to be able to, you know, to show, and this is how we're going to go about to do that. So, you know, you may want to do something, you know, like a logic model. If you look up like Kellogg logic models, if you don't know what those are.
Yeah, no, I use that as a metric.
Yeah, not as a metric, but it would help. But it helps.
Right. I see what you mean. Yes.
And then that will give you the data points in terms of the metrics that you're going to want to use. But also, you know, don't be afraid, especially if these funders are willing to listen to you. Don't be afraid of just asking them. You know, if they've supported this type of work before, don't be afraid of asking them of, you know, what kind of outcomes would you be looking for? Because, you know, when it's a pilot project, people understand you're trying something new.
Yeah, thank you so much. I already have, so I simply gave you a super abbreviated explanation about there are different components to that. It's not addressing the health aspect as soon as it come out is just one thing, but there are other layers. But thank you so much. This was really helpful.
And you can also, if you want, I mean, my email is ben@welcomeproject.org. If you send me stuff, I can look at it. It's hard without necessarily looking at stuff sometimes to kind of see, you know, to map it out in your head. The other thing too, and one of the beautiful things that I love about Zakim is you wrote, you know, if you wrote a proposal about this, you know, for funding, if they accepted it or they, you know, or it was declined, you know, when you ask why, you know, they'll give you answers. And, you know, they'll also, I've had these conversations, where do they think we're weak on in applications? So, you know, so they'll give you some, you know, some recommendations. And if they're saying, you know, oh no, we thought your metrics were great, you know, your evaluation and all that, you know, then I wouldn't worry too much about it. But if, you know, other groups are saying your metrics are weak, you know, offhand, I tell people this all the time, you know, a grant funder will write you a letter, you know, declining, and they give you a very generic no. Call, you know, ask if you can meet with them and ask these questions. And, you know, and usually when I email them, I usually say something like, you know, hey, I just want to know if we should apply next year. You know, let's have a conversation to see if we, you know, are we on track? Should we apply next year or not? And, you know, and get a better sense of if we, you know, if we should apply, what should we improve on our application? And, you know, a lot of funders generally will take time to do it, or, you know, they'll send you the notes that they looked at.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody have any other questions? I can't see hands, so maybe I should just get out of the screen. There we go. Now I can see everybody.
We don't have any questions in the chat yet.
Oh, yep. I'm writing my email in the chat. Somebody had asked if I could share it again. Okay, so one of the things that I think about is the medium you're using. We really didn't talk about this much. So if I'm writing an appeal letter, there's different science here. So generally, the science out there is a 4-page letter, so 2 pages front and back, gets more funding than a 1-page. I think that's true for new donors as opposed to, you know, people who give consistently to you. However, with that being said, most donors read your intro, your ending, and your PS and your PPS. So, you know, with that being said, you know, you really want to think about, we start with the thank yous and, you know, in your appeal letters, you know, thanks to you. blah, blah, blah. And when you end, again, you know, because of you, you know, that type of language, you know, let the donor feel like they're really part, you know, they're really part of your journey and the journey of the people you're working with. You know, so that's one thing. Yes, Ellen.
Hi, Ben. What about, I know some organizations do this, maybe you do it. What about having one of your constituents or somebody be the person who's the signer on a letter instead of like the executive director or the board director or whatever? How effective is that in the fundraising, you know, field?
I think, you know, we've done it, and to be quite honest with you, it gets better money than when I write a letter. I think it's, honestly, I'm a huge fan of it. Yeah. You know, the thing to think about is, you know, make sure it's their voice, that it's authentic. You know, make sure that it's empowering to them. Again, don't let it be the, you know, look at me, you know, kind of thing. And, you know, and just make sure that it's, you know, that it's written in the, you know, a lot of the eyes, you know, that it's inherent to them.
Great, thanks.
You know, the other thing is that I'm seeing more and more of is sort of videos. I love videos. Actually, we're working on one now, or actually working on two now. And, you know, and in those, they get to hear the constituent's voice. How you frame the question matters more, you know, will determine how they answer the question. So you have to think about, you know, how do you frame it in a way that, you know, that it shows that they're, you know, that they were empowered to do things, or that they were, you know, that you just elevated whatever they're trying for. You shared resources, you know, you did this, you did that, but, you know, they're grateful to you. You know, most constituents are really grateful. What I'm finding in having to do these videos is making sure that, you know, that they, you know, that it's a portrayal of who they are, not a portrayal of, you know, I was poor and weak and the Welcome Project helped make me strong, or, you know, whatever that is. You know, it is much more of making sure that, you know, they tell their story and that how, you know, that they're grateful for us. So yeah, you know, but in the videos, again, how you ask questions, you know, matters. Videos are great in emails, believe it or not. You can either, you know, sometimes you can embed a video that people can play. I know I can do that with like MailChimp and, you know, all those other things out there. But, you know, even a link to a YouTube video works. You know, we've done that many a times. If, you know, even better, if you're able to link it to, you know, something to a, you know, if you can put a YouTube video on your website, if you have all that know-how and technology. I don't. Luckily, we have a volunteer who does. You know, you want to put it right there where literally the donate button's right next to it. So that way, you know, you do this video, they click this link if they're really interested, they watch the video, and, you know, right there's the donate button. You know, again, you're doing an appeal, so even if it's in, you know, your email, if you're doing it by email, make sure that donate button is on the bottom. It says it very large, and that when you click on it, it links them straight to the donate page. Not to your website, not to anything. You want it right to the page, because the thing is they're ready to give right now. You don't need to sell them anymore. And I hate to use the word sell, but, you know, but it's true. You want to be, you know, they just want to do it right there. No thought. So, you know, one of the things that we do on our, you know, on our page is we give levels. So, you know, at you know, $1,000, you know, that provides 1 day of training of interpretation, you know, to our youth of how to do interpretation to our youth program. You know, think about those numbers. You know, but, you know, $25 buys somebody a book in our English class. So, you know, you want to kind of think about that. And even if you've never had somebody donate at a, you know, what's the highest level you had, and what's the highest level, and then what's a level after that? Put that on your screen. You know, because the other side of it is that, you know, as you all grow and do this, and, you know, depending on where you are, your communities become richer. People can give at bigger numbers. You know, one of the things, our levels stopped at $500. I, you know, randomly threw in $1,000 and said, we're going to do it. It's an aspirational goal. And, you know, we do get an occasional $1,000 giver. You know, people will have no problem writing in a $10 gift on a, you know, you'll always have the other field and the you know, the credit card thing. People have no problems donating at $50 or $25. They'll write that in. You know, think a little higher and let them write in a different number. Any other questions? Nothing in
I have a
chat?
question.
Yeah.
I have a question, thanks. Where our food program, Food and Friends, is about to have a 2-week virtual fundraiser in a campaign in May. And we used to do an annual live event every spring. And, you know, obviously last year we went virtual and this year as well. So it's interesting in the serving of emergency meals and supplemental meals, because I've been listening to you and I'm still, you know, I'm trying to think, because sometimes people forget about the hunger issue in a way, because it's, I don't know if it's just invisible, right? And people aren't thinking about it. And it's like, how do I, and we have our friends and loyal donors in the community for sure. How do I connect with new donors on this kind of hidden issue? I mean, and I know trying to make them think about that it's easy for them to go and purchase their own food. You know what I mean? So that's kind of one question. And then I think I had another question, but I think I forgot it. So basically, do you have a thought about, particularly about this issue about hunger?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's a couple different ways you can go. You know, one sort of immediately, and one thing that I would tell people, you know, if you're missing the boat, you should have put out an appeal letter now or email or whatever, because people are getting stimulus money and you want to be able to say, if you can, you know, if you don't need it, give it to us. So we'll just, you know, we'll put the money in another, you know, we'll give it to people who need it. But
Yes.
Food is, you know, literally you know, it's the stats. We've seen an increase in, you know, in the need for food. You know, our pantries are running out of food. You know, the lines in our, you know, in our pantries are this. You want to, you know, what was it? So for us, we don't do a food pantry, but we started a fund. And, you know, we've been literally paying utilities, rents, and food, you know, to immigrants, and a few other things. And literally, you know, being able to say that, you know, how much money we've spent on, you know, or how much money comes in requests for food alone, you know, for us is what we, you know, is a number we've used. You know, but you do want to say we're seeing a phenomenal increase in, you know, in food, as, you know, the pandemic has really, you know, hurt frontline workers who can't go to work, you know, hourly workers here. You know, they've been out of work, they're unable to do it. Yes, it's true. You know, you don't even have to mention this line, but, you know, yeah, it's true that people on unemployment are getting a little extra money, but for a lot of people that doesn't even cover, you know, they're facing they're facing complete instabilities. They're, you know, they're juggling. Do I pay rent? Do I buy food? Do I pay utilities? And that's what you want to talk about is, you know, are those pieces.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And one of the thoughts that was kind of interesting during the pandemic was, because we created both a walk-up line and a drive-up line, we found that in our drive-up line were new faces, like people who wouldn't want to go and sit down at an indoor meal for the community, but really felt okay coming to a drive-up line and having food, you know, for their family, and they were more supplemental for these families. Like they were a restaurant worker who lost their job. And so I don't know, there was also something there.
But that's the story. You have a restaurant worker who lost who lost their job.
Okay.
And if you make the whole thing about this restaurant worker and, you know, and give, you know, doing it in a way of giving dignity back to people who, you know, who feel like they need, you know, they need so much help.
Mhm.
And, by providing these meals, just walking up to the car, handing them meals, no questions asked kind of thing, whatever it is,
Okay.
they have food today. And, they don't have to, this is one less thing they have to worry about. They can
Yes.
put their money towards X, Y, and Z.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? So the only thing I would say, honestly, is, when you talk to individuals, the story should only be, well, one, when you're writing appeal letters, the story, I try to keep it no more than 400 words. I know that, that's a little less than a page. So 4 pages is 3 or 4 stories. Somebody just, Ellen, somebody just put in the comments, food insecurity has impacted those who have never anticipated this critical basic need. Great wording, Linda. But, so you want to think of 3 or 4 stories that you might be able to come up with. Video, one story is as easy as as you need. Donor, 1 story, no more than 5 minutes. The goal of a major donor visit is to get them talking, not you. So, if you're talking more than they're talking, it's usually a bad sign. At least that's always been my experience. Unless they're, a frequent donor. So, so make sure, that you just want to give a short story. Even if the story is not complete, it's okay, because they'll ask questions, to really understand the story. But, make it as simple as that. Any other questions?
The chat looks clear.
Yep. I mean, if everyone's fine, I'm good with jumping off. I do have, and I can share with you. I'm going to share my screen real quick, if this is helpful for people. Oops. Wrong button. Word. I sort of have this, which does the same thing. It's the PowerPoint, just in different form. If that's helpful for people, I can share that with you. It's just a little 2-pager kind of thing. I can send that to, to Eric and Dominique, and they can, forward it along to you all if you'd like. But the goal, sort of the goal here is, if you think about it, think of a movie. Think of how a movie starts, what happens in the middle that you actually pay attention to, and what, and how the movie ends. And always make it, that there will be a sequel. Because at the end of the day, the work you do will continue on, because the day that whatever you're doing no longer needs to be a need, at least this is how I see it, the day that I don't need to deal with immigration work anymore, immigration's been settled and everyone's great and English classes are abound and everyone's doing all these things that we do, and there's just no need for my organization, I close. So, so for you, it's, always think of that ending, that is the long story, is, you're preparing for a sequel.
Well, thank you so much for that, Ben. And for everyone who's in attendance, know that we will be sharing a recording of today's session. And also we can include the slides and the handout that Ben just referenced. So seeing that there are no more questions, we just want to thank everyone for joining us. And once again, thank you so much, Ben, for facilitating today's session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.